My stepson said I wasn't his dad, so I stopped trying, and when life hit him hard, he realized too late who'd actually been there all along. I really thought I was doing everything right. For 5 years, I'd been raising Aiden, my wife Laura's son, like he was my own flesh and blood. I was there for every scraped knee, every late-night homework meltdown, every birthday candle he blew out. We'd moved to a quiet suburb outside Seattle, bought a small blue house with a crooked mailbox, adopted a golden retriever named Max, and built what I thought was a normal, peaceful life. Our Sundays were for ice cream, movie nights, and laughter that filled the house. But when Aiden turned 15, something shifted. He started keeping his door shut, his headphones in, his words short. I told myself it was just the age. Then came the day of his school's basketball tournament, the one I never missed. I showed up with my old Nikon, shouting his name, cheering like an idiot in the front row. When his team won, I ran to the court, ready to wrap him in a hug. He shoved me. "Back off," he said, loud enough for the bleachers to hear. "You're not my dad." The laughter stung worse than the shove. I stood there, frozen, while phones came out, recording. Laura tried to smooth it over later, said he didn't mean it, but something inside me cracked. 5 years, gone in 5 seconds. If I wasn't his dad, then maybe it was time I stopped pretending to be. The next morning, I didn't knock on his door. Normally, I'd call his name twice, joke about missing the bus, and have toast waiting by the time he stumbled into the kitchen. But not that day. I poured my coffee in silence and left for work before he woke. When I came home, Laura told me he'd overslept, missed first period, and earned himself detention for a week. I just nodded. It became a quiet pattern. One small thing at a time, the kind of care you don't notice until it's gone. I stopped checking if he'd packed his lunch. Stopped asking how practice went. Stopped picking him up from school when it rained. Laura tried to fill the gap, but she could feel the chill too. We were both pretending not to notice that something fundamental had shifted. A week later, I found him in the laundry room, swearing under his breath. He'd stuffed all his clothes, colors, whites, even his basketball uniform, into the same load. Now everything was a soft, humiliating pink. He looked at me, waiting for the usual dad joke, the gentle fix. Instead, I walked past him. Not a word. He stood there, silent, clutching the ruined clothes like he didn't understand what was happening. Parent-teacher night, Laura went alone. I stayed home, telling her I had paperwork. Later, she mentioned how his teacher said Aiden was unfocused, tired, angry all the time. I didn't comment. I just stared at the TV, pretending to listen to the evening news. He started eating dinner in his room. When his report card came in with 2 failing grades, I left it on the table. Didn't even sign it. Laura argued we needed to talk to him, but I shrugged it off. He wanted space, I said. Let's give it to him. Then came the day the school sent an email about him getting into an argument with another student. Something about someone mocking his fake dad. Normally, I'd have gone down there, straightened things out, told the teacher what really happened. This time, I didn't. I let him handle it alone. That week, I overheard him mutter to his friend on the phone that the house feels empty even when everyone's home. It hit harder than I expected. But pride, or maybe hurt, made me turn away. He wanted distance, and I gave it to him. Cold, heavy, suffocating distance. When the school called him out in front of the class for his slipping grades, I didn't defend him. Laura came home furious that I hadn't gone to the meeting. "You're punishing him for something he doesn't understand," she said. But she didn't understand either. I wasn't punishing him. I was teaching him what it meant to erase someone who cared. Let him feel what it's like when the person who used to fight for you just stops showing up. Within a month, the house felt more like a train station than a home. Everyone passing through. No one stopping long enough to speak. Laura worked late most nights, claiming it was for extra income, but I knew it was avoidance. I started volunteering for every extra project at work just to have an excuse to stay out. And Aiden, he drifted farther each day. He'd come home after midnight, eyes dull, smelling faintly of cheap beer and smoke. Sometimes I'd hear him stumble over the stairs. Sometimes I wouldn't hear him at all. Laura tried to reach him at first, Gentle talks, text messages, reminders that she cared. He brushed her off. The house filled with tension that clung to the air like dust. Even Max, our dog, stopped sleeping by his door. Then one night, the phone rang just after 11. A local number. The voice on the other end was calm, almost routine. "Sir, we have your son here. He was caught smoking behind a convenience store with a few other kids. Nothing serious, but we can't release him without a guardian present." My first thought wasn't fear, it was exhaustion. I drove down to the station, parked, and sat there for a while, watching the rain smear across the windshield. Inside, through the glass doors, I could see him sitting on a bench, arms crossed, trying to look tough but failing miserably. When the officer brought him out, he looked anywhere but at me. "That your dad?" the officer asked casually. Aiden didn't hesitate. "No," he said flatly. "Just my mom's husband." The words didn't pierce this time. They didn't even sting. I just nodded, thanked the officer, and unlocked the car doors. He climbed in, headphones already on, the smell of smoke heavy in the air. We drove home in silence. The next night, he didn't come home for dinner. I didn't call, didn't check his location, didn't even mention it to Laura until she noticed his empty seat. She panicked, calling his friends, pacing the kitchen. I just said, "He'll be back when he's hungry." And he was around 3 in the morning. Slammed his bedroom door like a final punctuation mark. The distance grew into something colder than resentment. It became indifference. When his midterm results arrived, he didn't even bother showing them to us. His coach called to say Aiden had quit the basketball team. Said it's not worth it, the coach told me. "He used to light up when you were in the stands." I thanked him and hung up. That weekend, I found a broken picture frame under the couch. The one that used to hold a photo of the 3 of us at the pier, ice cream dripping down our hands. The glass was cracked right through my face. Laura cried that night. She said she didn't recognize her son anymore. I didn't tell her that I didn't recognize myself either. I'd built walls to protect what was left of me, but those same walls had turned our house into a quiet battlefield. And still, I convinced myself it was necessary, that letting him fall would teach him something, that maybe, when he hit the ground, he'd look back and realize who'd been trying to hold him up all along. He wanted independence. Now he had it, the kind that came with silence, empty dinners, and a father figure who no longer reached out his hand. The call came on a Tuesday evening, right after dinner. Laura's voice was trembling so hard I could barely understand her. "They beat him up, Michael. He's at the hospital." For a second, the world went silent. I didn't even remember grabbing my keys. The drive, there was a blur, red lights, rain, the hum of the wipers. My hands gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. When I reached the ER, I saw him before he saw me. Lying on a gurney, one eye swollen shut, a split lip, bruises painting his face in ugly shades of purple and blue. A police officer stood nearby talking to a nurse. Laura was sitting beside him, mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching his hand. He wouldn't look at me, not once. The officer nodded at me. "You're the guardian?" I hesitated. The word felt heavy. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm his stepdad." It turned out the group he'd been running with wasn't just passing time at the arcade or behind stores. They were older, kids with fake IDs, no real families, living on borrowed money and bad decisions. They'd gotten Aiden into small debts. Food, gas, a phone upgrade he couldn't afford. When he couldn't pay them back, they decided to teach him a lesson. Laura was crying, asking the same questions over and over. How could this happen? Why didn't we see it coming? I stood there, numb. When the doctor came with the clipboard and asked who would sign the treatment authorization, Laura's hands shook so badly she couldn't hold a pen. She looked at Aiden, then at me. Before she could speak, he whispered, barely audible, "Mom can't. Let Michael do it." It hit me like a weight to the chest. Not because of the trust, but because of what it meant. He was finally reaching out. I signed the forms without saying a word. My handwriting came out shaky, like I was the one who'd been hurt. While they stitched him up, I sat in the hallway outside his room, elbows on my knees, staring at the tiles. I could hear the muffled hum of machines, nurses walking past, the occasional beep of a monitor. But mostly I heard my own thoughts, the kind that don't let you look away anymore. He wasn't just a rebellious kid. He was a lost boy, one who had pushed away every lifeline, every ounce of love, until there was nothing left to catch him. And I'd let him fall. Laura sat beside me, quiet for a long time. "You were right," she said finally. "He needed to see what life is like without support. But maybe he's seen enough now." I didn't answer, because deep down I knew the truth. I hadn't done it to teach him a lesson. I'd done it to protect myself from the pain of caring too much for someone who didn't want me. Now, watching the boy I'd raised lying behind a hospital curtain, I realized that sometimes silence doesn't teach strength. It just leaves scars no one sees until it's too late. That night, as I left his room, I paused at the door. He still hadn't looked at me, but when I said, "Get some rest, kid," I saw his fingers twitch, the smallest, most fragile acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. When Aiden came home from the hospital, the house felt different. Quieter in a way that made every sound echo. For a week, he barely spoke, moving through the rooms like a shadow, eyes downcast, headphones on, pretending the world didn't exist. I gave him space, though the weight in my chest made each hour feel like a lifetime. Then one night, he hesitated in the doorway of the kitchen, voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't you come get me sooner?" I didn't flinch, didn't soften. "Why would I?" I said. "You told me I'm not your dad." He looked down at the floor, cheeks flushed, swallowing hard. "I was stupid," he muttered. No excuses, no whining, just recognition of what he'd said, and the damage it caused. I didn't answer. I just walked past him, leaving the room heavy with unsaid things. The next evening, he decided to cook dinner. I should have been worried, but instead, I peeked from the living room. Smoke filled the kitchen. Pots were scorched, noodles overcooked, and sauce splattered across the counters. He stood there, red-faced, arms trembling. "I just wanted things to feel normal again," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. That night marked a turning point. After cleaning up the disaster together in silence, he came to me, eyes steady for the first time, and apologized. Not a half-hearted sorry thrown into passing. Not a muttered mumble under his breath. A proper apology, acknowledging the words that had cut deep, the years of effort erased in a single sentence. I told him what I'd felt. How words like, "You're not my dad," can sink into a person and linger. How they don't fade overnight. And he nodded, listening, understanding without argument. Something shifted after that. Slowly at first, he started taking on small responsibilities without being asked. Folding his laundry, emptying the trash, tidying his room. Then he studied harder, asked questions about homework, helped Laura with groceries without prompting. He began speaking in the evenings, telling stories from school, joking with Max, even letting me snap a few photos again. The silence that had consumed our house for months began to lift, replaced by awkward, cautious conversation. The laughs were fewer, the smiles smaller than before, but they were real, authentic, a fragile bridge being rebuilt between us. It wasn't perfect. The wounds of words, of absence, of distance, remained, and they would for a long time. But for the first time since that basketball game, I felt like we were moving forward. And I realized something that hurt and healed at the same time. Sometimes, it takes the deepest hurt to make someone see who's been there all along. We weren't back to the old routine yet. We were something different now, wary, cautious, but present. And maybe that was enough. 3 years passed like wind through the trees. Aiden grew into a young man I barely recognized. Tall, strong, with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He graduated high school on a crisp June morning. The kind where the sun cuts through the clouds just right, painting the gym in gold. He walked across the stage with a sense of purpose, ready for college, ready for life. When it came time for him to speak, I didn't expect much. A short, polite nod to teachers and classmates. But then he stepped to the microphone, paused, and looked out at the crowd, straight past the rows of parents and teachers. to me. "I want to thank the man who didn't have to be there, but stayed anyway," he said, voice steady. "Michael, thank you." The gym erupted in applause, a roar so loud it shook the rafters. Couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, my hands trembled. All those years of silent distance, all the fights, all the bruises and harsh words, condensed into a single moment of recognition. After the ceremony, he came over. His smile was small, hesitant, but there was honesty in his eyes. "I was awful," he said quietly. "You were a teenager," I replied, the words gentle but firm. "But I never stopped caring." He nodded, a tear sliding down his cheek. "You were my dad all along. I just figured it out too late." It wasn't too late for me. Not anymore. Now, he calls sometimes, not every day, not every week, but often enough that I feel the connection isn't broken. Each time we talk about his classes, his friends, small victories and setbacks. And every time, right before we hang up, he says the same words. "Thanks for not giving up on me." I always answer the same way. Real dads don't give up, even when their kids say they're not one. And in those calls, I hear not just his voice, but the years we lost, and the bond we rebuilt from scratch. Scarred. Maybe, but stronger than I ever imagined. Because sometimes, the right thing isn't noticed immediately. Sometimes it's realized only after pain, distance, and mistakes. But when it's finally seen, it's worth every moment of waiting. I look at him now, at the man he's becoming, and I know I stayed. And that made all the difference.